Hey, where was the Marvel Godzilla scaling?
What? Don't worry, I'll take care of this with my specialty.
We're only covering the major versions of him. Oh yeah? So why'd you put him on the thumbnail? Actually, he's not a canon, he's a gag character. Big trust.
Stop lying!
Death Battle finally dropped Godzilla vs. Hulk, and for a lot of people, it was their version of Goku vs. Superman. You know, especially in the kaiju space, this is a pretty big matchup. And at first, I didn't want to cover it. I really didn't. But seeing as how I'm kind of one of the bigger Godzilla scalers on the platform, I feel like it's kind of my responsibility to at least talk about it. So that's what today's video is going to be. It's going to be largely unscripted for the most part because generally speaking, Godzilla scaling, I know like the back of my hand. I don't really need a plan for it. So I can really talk about what this video did right, what it did wrong, and what it did kind of so-so. Once again, I want to say that this is not Hulk versus Godzilla. I'm not going to give you guys a definitive answer as to who would win this matchup because, you know, frankly, it's too big. One of my buddies, Godzilla King of the Monsters, has this Goliath of a video. It's around 30 minutes long, explaining the matchup much more thoroughly than Death Battle did. So after this video, I implore you guys to go check that video out. But if you want to see my take on this Death Battle specifically in the logic and lines of scaling that they talked about and presented, then this is the video for you. So yeah, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video up, and all that jazz. It's a pretty short video, obviously. I'm making it off the spot. So yeah, let's just get into the video. I just want to say firstly, for the most part, the Hulk scaling was pretty good, I would say. It's just a basic Hulk scale for the most part. Obviously, you have his universal feats, his higher end feats, and they sprinkled about some of like the mountain, you know, pushing stuff. I understand why they do that. I just find it a little weird because you're dealing with characters who are really strong. So yeah, I mean, for the most part, the Hulk scaling was pretty spot on. They have a habit of not going over terms like, you know, outerversal or immeasurable speed. And I understand that as a power scaler YouTuber myself. Some of those broader concepts kind of go over most viewers' head. So I understand why they attempted to streamline all the information. But for the most part, I'm not the most, you know, credible Hulk scaler, I would say. I'm not like a genius on Hulk scaling, but it's a basic Hulk scale for the most part. It's solid. It's really the Godzilla part of the video that really starts to kind of boggle my head for the most part. I'm not a god. I love Godzilla. We all love Godzilla, but I wanted Hulk to win, to be honest, because I thought it would be funny, and Hulk ended up winning. But I'm just gonna say it now. I don't really agree with how they scale Godzilla or the conclusion of this matchup because I felt like they kind of gave Godzilla a bad hand. But to really dive into why that's the case, let's just start with what they talked about. Obviously, they do a great job of, you know, introducing Godzilla's origins and some of his most basic stats, right? I love their editing, really high quality stuff. But once this portion of the video really starts to kind of, for lack of better words, lose the plot is when they introduce Godzilla Ultima. Godzilla Ultima is a character that I've scaled here on the channel. He's a very powerful version of the character. Easily a fourth dimensional being. He's able to, you know, destroy universes. He can control things like causality, space-time. All of it is just like playthings for him. I've gone over it in my video, and I think Death Battle did a good job of explaining what Ultima is on his own. What really starts to become a little weird, though, is when they try to suggest that Ultima is like the peak of composite Godzilla. When they say that, they try to attempt to say that every version of the character that we've seen is merely an avatar of Ultima. And their evidence, if you look at the text at the side of the screen, is that the end credits of Singular Point include cameos of older films and kaiju. But off the bat, Death Battle decided to come up with a crazy headcanon, and their only evidence was Easter eggs during an end credit sequence that isn't even canon to like the events of the show. And when you do that, there's obviously a lot of bad things because Godzilla Ultima is far from the strongest version of the character. But for some strange reason, that's the version of the character that Death Battle wanted to really peak Godzilla at for whatever reason. They talked about other Godzillas like Godzilla in Hell in passing, but they didn't really talk about, you know, what makes Godzilla in Hell so powerful. I'm not one of Godzilla in Hell's biggest glazers or anything. I think that he's not as strong as people think, but he's way stronger than Ultima at least. Like all they talk about is him defeating God Mountain and the Devil Kaiju, and then they say he destroyed a planet. You know, that's Godzilla Hell scaling is a little bit more complicated than that. I'm not gonna have a whole section dedicated to his scaling because frankly I don't even think it's that good, especially when you're going up against Comic Hulk. But if you want to see a much more thorough explanation, be sure to check out King of the Monsters channel once again. But I think for the most part, he's easily a multiversal plus character. You know, the god that he beats in that story is the god who created the entire Godzilla IDW cosmology, which at worst is an infinite multiverse that we know connects to stuff like the Power Rangers Boom Run, which in itself has higher levels of existence. So God Mountain viewing pretty much all that as finite would make him a fifth to sixth dimensional being. Godzilla just blew him up. Once again, it's not high enough to box with Comic Hulk for sure, but it's far higher than like Godzilla Ultima, for example. So I don't know why they were so fixated on this random anime version of the character when there's way stronger versions of Godzilla in the mainstream that we could have been talking about. But while we're on the topic of Godzilla's alternate versions, they for some strange reason weren't using comic book scaling or any of the crossovers that he's had. Obviously, I understand not using the DC crossover stuff. That, you know, canonicity of that is pretty dubious. But both Marvel runs of Godzilla are explicitly stated to be canon to Earth 616 multiple times. And there's a little bar at the side of the screen that tries to imply that those instances are gag or non-canon, but in actuality, they're pretty much 100% canon. Remember that, because that's going to be really, really important at the end of the video. Godzilla is canon to Marvel. But with that being said, let's just move on to the fight. And I liked it for the most part. I found it very interesting, but it has the problem where it's only right in the pretense that Death Battle put for this fight, you know, because at this point, it's not even Comp Godzilla versus Hulk. It's literally just Godzilla Ultima versus Hulk. And there's much stronger versions of Godzilla. So obviously all the visual things of Hulk just beating down Godzilla and him coming back, yeah, that would happen because Hulk is just far stronger than anything they mentioned for Godzilla, as well as just Godzilla Ultima as a whole. And yeah, the ending was correct too in that sense, where Bruce Banner would ultimately just come up with something that could, you know, nullify Godzilla for the most part. Death Battle did a pretty good job of talking about Bruce Banner's technical prowess. You know, he made an ultimate nullifier, so obviously you give him some time, he's going to be able to beat Godzilla Ultima's true form, or at least keep him outside of the battlefield to the point where he gets a win. But I mean, once again, that's the problem. This is not even Godzilla versus Hulk. It's just Ultima versus Hulk. And the ending analysis kind of just suffers from the same problem, where it only works under the pretense that they put the fight under. Obviously, yeah, Hulk's cosmology and his, you know, range is a lot farther than Ultima's real, you know, prowess or shown capabilities. But once again, they use the House of Examples as an example as to a level of existence that Godzilla just doesn't scale to. But if they were to use the canon comic books that they just said were not canon, even though they are, we have statements of Godzilla just scaling outright to such planes of existence. Godzilla in Marvel was an absolute beast. He just wrecked pretty much every team you can think of. And then if you subscribe to the logic that that's merely an avatar to Ultima, then using Death Battle's own logic, Godzilla would have won if they just simply scaled the character as this composite version as they typically do. They mentioned like anime Godzillas, video game Godzillas, cartoon Godzillas, so I don't understand why they didn't explicitly talk about the canon comic books. Fun fact for you, the Godzilla on that thumbnail is Marvel Godzilla. So just to say he's a gag when he's not is a little weird. And I mean, that's pretty much all I've got to say about the video, right? I agree with it and I disagree with it for kind of weird reasons. I think if we were to limit it to what they said, then yes, explicitly is correct, you know? But the problem is they just ignored certain parts of the character when they're attempting to make this composite version of the character. It's not Comp Godzilla. It's like this weird pseudo pick and choose version of Godzilla versus the Hulk. And that version of Godzilla would definitely lose to the Hulk. But the problem is, it's not Godzilla, or at least Godzilla to his fullest potential. And the Godzillas that were stronger than Ultima, they kind of just sort of breezed over. But yeah, that's my thoughts for the most part. Do you agree? Am I a, crying Godzilla fan, even though I wanted Hulk to win? Or am I a Hulk tard that's just glazing the Hulk, even though I was mostly spending the duration of this video kind of confused with Death Battle's line of logic? Whatever you think, be sure to put your comments down below. And once again, I want to implore you guys to check out Godzilla King of the Monsters channel, because where I kind of touched up on some of my discrepancies in their line of logic, he plans on doing a fully, length debunk of that video. And frankly, he's a much better guy for the job than myself. So with that being said, I'll see you guys later this week with an actual video. But until then, stay big, G fans.